We left our application in a place where we had created 2 routes for our customers from the database. We have this index function that would display all of our customers from the database. We also created a edit function in which if we sent over a ID through our query string, it would display just one customer. So in other words, if I had given it the ID of 7, then I have this form that was created that displayed the data from the customer. We didn't wire up the submit button. I think all we did with the submit button was enabled ourselves to see the customers again. And so when the way that we wired that up was in our controller. So if we went to app, HTTP, and customers controller, we had those 2 indexes, those 2 functions written already. We had index and we had the edit, which was returning the appropriate views with the appropriate query strings that we had wired up for connecting to our database. So the only thing I've done since then on my own, which should be a review, is I've added this nav bar. So our application was already wired up for Bootstrap. So if I look in my resources and views tab, I have I created an include folder that has a nav.blade.php. Just grabbed a bunch of sample code from Get Bootstrap that provided the navigation, and then I filled in our routes. So I put in our customers route, which showed all of the customers, and then I hard-coded in an ID. I hard-coded in a 7 so that if I click on Edit Customer, that is working for the moment. Obviously, I'm not going to end up hard-coding in that 7. We're going to put in we are going to let it put in an ID, but I did that just for demonstration to get this started. And then in my appblade.php, I included that inks.nav in my appblade.php because we utilize that for our layout. So that's all I've added since the last time we got together and we're working on this app. So now we're going to add the functionality to our app to do all of our CRUD, C-R-U-D, create, read, update, and delete of our data, customer data in our database. So that's what we're going to do in this video. All right, so let's first go to our customers controller. And remember what we did here. Remember that we started off using the DB model or the DB library, but then we overwrote that and we created a customer model, and then we using the customer, we did all of this sort of thing. So that was really cool. All right, so you might want to copy all of this code because I'm about to delete this controller. Copy this code and put it someplace else so you don't have to retype it back in, or if it's good practice, which it always is to retype back in, we're going to do that. But I'm going to delete this controller and create a new one, and you'll see why in a minute. I'm going to close out my server, and I'm going to use Artisan to wire up a new controller for me. Why on earth are you doing that? I will show you. Let me just walk through it. Artisan make controller. Well, that looks like the same thing we did before. We had a customers controller. That's the same thing we did before, nothing new. But now I'm going to add this -- resource. And let me see what that's going to do for me. Okay, so I have my customers controller, so nothing is different there. But now you're going to see that Laravel added a whole bunch of new functions for me. And the idea behind all these functions is it's pre-wiring all of those functions that I'm going to need on my customers my customers table, to do all of those things that we have done before, as far as, well, let's just see, index. Okay, so I think I have that code pasted somewhere, copied somewhere. So I'm just going to paste the code back in that we had before for index. And that is a function that is just going to return all of my customers. So we already had that wired up before. Now I'm just plugging it in here. I need to make sure that since I'm using that model, customer model, that I include that back in here because I've lost that. So use namespace as app, which is the default namespace for Laravel. And we have a customer Okay, so this customer part should still work. All right, what else did Laravel add for me? Let me see. So if I keep going down, show the form for creating a new database. All right, so this is a function that was written for me to create a new customer. And in our terminology, we're going to use this function for creating a new customer. So we're going to have to wire that part up. Great. Store. So it already set it up to receive a post request or a request from our form that is going to store a new customer. Okay. Show with an ID. So it set up the scenario where we would click on one of the customer. We had a list of customers. If we click on one of those customers, we're just going to see one of that particular customer's information. Okay. Edit. Well, that sounds familiar. So this is, I think, what we wired up the last time. So I'm going to copy that code in there. We did an edit before. And so it looks like it's set up to receive an ID, which is what we've done here. Receive an ID, find that customer based on that ID, and then return, we had it return Edt Customer with that customer. Okay, great. So that's already wired up. And so let's see. Update makes sense. So we have a form that was already filled in. In other words, that would be the end result of this submit. We make some changes, click on submit, and that's going to fire off this function with the request, the information that was filled in, as well as that ID, so the database knows which customer to update. Also, let's see, and destroy, so that is another word for, in our case, it's going to be delete. So, okay, that seems awesome. What else can we do? Let's see. So in my web PHP, in my routes, now I've got to define a route for all of those things. That sounds like a lot of work. Are we going to do that? No. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to type in the word route, and we're going to do route resource customers, and then we're going to define the controller, which was customers controller R, and then I'm going to comment these two out, and let's see what happens. All right, so wait, what? All right, so in my command prompt here, I'm going to type in something I'm not sure that we did in class yet, but we're going to do PHP artisan route list. So let's get an idea of all of the routes that have been defined for us now that we've finished this. Let me just see what happens. Okay, whoa. Okay, so let me span this out so we can see it together. So what routes are defined for us? Okay. Well, it turns out that by using this resource, it's creating a route for all of those routes, or all of those functions that we just saw were created automatically for us in the controller. So if we look here, it says if there's a GET request, just a plain GET request for customers, just customers, then it's going to call the customers.index function. If there's a post, it's going to call that store function. If there's a customers create with a GET, then we're going to call that create function, and et cetera, et cetera. There's our parameters and so forth. So it turns out that when we created our controller, our customers controller, using that -- resource, then we get all of these cool functions set up for us. And then utilizing this route resource, it's going to create a route to all of those functions that were created for us, so we don't have to worry about that. And now we just need to wire up those functions so that we can finish out our CRUD, C-R-U-T, or D, create, read, update, and delete functionality for our customers. And we're going to do those in the upcoming videos.